The room was buzzing with laughter and chatter as people gathered for the small community event. Children ran around with balloons in their hands, and the aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air. In the corner of the hall, a grand piano stood under a soft light, its polished surface reflecting the excitement around it. No one really expected anything special to happen with it that day. Most people had come for the usual performances and games, not for anything extraordinary. She walked up to the piano with a playful grin. Her eyes sparkled as she glanced at the audience, sensing their curiosity. People turned to look, some whispering, wondering what she was going to do. She acted as if she had no clue about the piano, slowly taking a seat on the bench. Her posture seemed awkward, her fingers hovering over the keys without actually pressing them. Some people in the crowd smiled politely, thinking it was just a little funny moment. Others raised eyebrows, unsure if she was serious or just messing around. "I guess I'll try something," she said, her voice light and teasing. She let her hands drop onto the keys with exaggerated clumsiness, pressing a few random notes that sounded completely off. A few children giggled, and a couple of adults laughed quietly. It was the perfect start for a harmless prank, and she could see that the audience had already started forming their first impressions. They thought they knew exactly what was coming next. She continued pressing keys randomly, making loud, chaotic sounds. Each note was hit with just enough uncertainty to make it clear she was joking. Some people covered their ears, others shook their heads in amusement, and a few leaned in, curious to see how bad it could get. Her act was so convincing that everyone assumed she couldn't play at all. She even let out a dramatic sigh as if frustrated with herself, adding to the illusion that she had no musical talent. As she played, she noticed a little boy at the front who had been staring intently. He tilted his head, trying to understand what was happening. She made a small gesture with her hand, as if to apologize for the noise, and the boy laughed, thinking it was all part of the fun. Nearby, a woman whispered to her friend, "She's terrible. I can't believe someone would sit at the piano like that." The friend nodded, smirking, clearly entertained by the apparent disaster unfolding before them. She leaned back slightly, pretending to struggle with the bench as if it were too high, and then glanced at the sheet music that wasn't even there. The exaggeration was subtle but effective. People were fully invested in the performance of a complete amateur. Every misstep she made seemed unintentional, and the audience was completely convinced by her act. It was a delicate balance between chaos and control, and she was managing it perfectly. Some teenagers in the audience started recording on their phones, laughing at the supposed disaster. One of them whispered, "Wait until she finishes. This is going to be hilarious on social media." They didn't know, and neither did anyone else, that the prank was about to take a completely unexpected turn. She continued, deliberately hitting keys that clashed with each other, creating a cacophony of sound that made everyone wince and laugh at the same time. The room was filled with a mix of confusion, amusement, and anticipation. She watched their faces closely, noticing the small movements and expressions that gave away their complete surprise and curiosity. She had done this many times before in her mind, but seeing it in real life with real reactions was thrilling. As the chaotic notes filled the room, she paused for a moment and leaned toward the audience, smiling mysteriously. The children in the front leaned closer, sensing that something unexpected was coming. Adults who had been laughing now stopped, curious and slightly anxious. The playful energy in the room shifted ever so slightly, but no one could predict what was about to happen next. She let her fingers hover over the keys again, pretending to hesitate. "Maybe I should just give up," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. The audience chuckled, some nodding in agreement, thinking this was just a harmless little prank. She nodded, as if taking their reaction into account, and then, just as everyone was settled in their expectations of bad music, she prepared to do the unimaginable. It was a moment of quiet suspense. She inhaled deeply, her fingers poised above the keys. The laughter and whispers had quieted down, replaced with an almost palpable sense of curiosity. The audience was completely unaware of what was coming, fully convinced they were about to witness a piano disaster. Her eyes twinkled with a secret, and she pressed down on a key, the sound soft and deliberate. Then another, and another. The first few notes were simple yet precise. People leaned forward, surprised at the sudden change. She continued, slowly weaving the notes into a melody that was unexpectedly harmonious. The prank was transforming. The chaotic, clumsy sounds had begun to form a pattern, something beautiful emerging from the fake disaster. Some in the crowd whispered to each other, unsure if their ears were deceiving them. "Is she good?" someone murmured. She played on, carefully blending the melody, each note deliberate and expressive. The initial laughter faded, replaced by amazement. Children stopped moving, adults held their breath, and the entire room seemed captivated by the music. It was a subtle shift, almost magical, as if the room itself was leaning in to listen. The prank had done its job, grabbing everyone's attention, and now the real surprise was unfolding. By the time she finished the first few bars, the audience was on the edge of their seats, completely caught off guard. They had come expecting humor and chaos, but instead, they were witnessing talent and control hidden behind a playful facade. The tension in the room was electric, and every eye was on her as she continued. She smiled faintly, enjoying the moment and the astonishment on their faces. Her prank had succeeded in more ways than one. Not only had she captured everyone's attention with humor and misdirection, but she had also begun to reveal a hidden talent that no one had anticipated. The room was now silent, except for the gentle, precise notes flowing from the piano. The audience had shifted from amusement to wonder, and she could feel their complete focus. This was the perfect start to a story that would soon take them further, a prank that would transform into something unforgettable. The young woman knew that the best moments in life were the ones that surprised people, and right now, she was giving them exactly that. The laughter, the whispers, the curiosity, all were building toward a moment that would leave the entire room stunned. Even in these first few minutes, the scene was set for a story that no one would forget. The playful act of pretending to be terrible at the piano had drawn the audience in, and the secret melody that followed hinted at a depth they were only beginning to understand. The prank had started with laughter and curiosity, but it was already moving toward shock and awe, a transformation that would define the evening. And as she played, the room seemed to lean closer, holding its collective breath, ready to see what would come next. Every misstep, every deliberate note, every playful glance had set the stage for a moment that no one would ever forget. A moment where a simple prank would evolve into something extraordinary. The chaotic sounds she had started with were now giving way to a surprising melody. The audience, who had been laughing and shaking their heads moments before, now leaned forward with curious expressions. Children stopped running around, and adults paused mid-conversation. Even those who had been recording the scene on their phones lowered their devices, unsure of what they were witnessing. The young woman's fingers moved with precision, yet she maintained the playful energy that had fooled everyone from the start. She glanced at the crowd, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Some people were still trying to make sense of the shift. One man whispered to his companion, "I thought she couldn't play at all. Did you hear that?" The companion nodded, her jaw slightly dropped. The room was filled with whispers and quiet gasps. The prank had evolved into something unexpected, a delicate dance between chaos and brilliance. Her hands flowed over the keys, switching between light, playful notes and deeper, more resonant ones. She occasionally hit a random key, as if to remind the audience of the joke, but each time it only added charm to the performance. Children smiled, trying to mimic her movements in the air with their tiny hands. A few older attendees tilted their heads, impressed at the skill hidden behind her playful act. It was as if she had taken the room on a journey from laughter to awe in a matter of minutes. She allowed herself a small pause, leaning back slightly as if gathering her strength. The room remained silent, the only sound coming from her breathing and the soft echo of the piano notes. Everyone's attention was fixed on her. Some people whispered among themselves, sharing theories about how someone could go from such a clumsy start to playing with such control. The young woman's eyes flicked toward the audience, enjoying the suspense she had created. She had always loved the reaction of people who never expected anything from her. It was a feeling like no other. Suddenly, she changed the pace, striking a series of notes with a rhythm that made heads turn and eyes widen. The melody was becoming richer, more expressive. Each note told a small story, tugging at the emotions of the audience. The children's faces lit up, their smiles growing wider. Some of the adults felt a lump in their throats, surprised at how a playful prank could reveal so much hidden talent. It was a mixture of astonishment and admiration, a rare combination that held the room completely captive. She moved her hands more freely now, no longer pretending to struggle. The playful energy remained, but it was intertwined with grace and control. People began to lean in, not wanting to miss a single note. Every time her fingers danced across the keys, it felt like a story unfolding. The sounds she created filled every corner of the room, reaching people who had not been paying full attention before. They turned, caught in the moment, unable to resist the pull of the music. Some of the teenagers in the back who had been laughing earlier now sat in stunned silence. Their phones were forgotten at their sides. One whispered, "I can't believe it. She's amazing." Another nodded slowly, shaking their head in disbelief. Even those who had been skeptical now looked at her with new respect. The young woman had completely reversed their expectations. What had started as a joke was now an unforgettable performance. She smiled faintly, acknowledging the shift in the room. Her fingers glided over the keys effortlessly, each note precise and deliberate. She played with a confidence that only someone who truly understood the instrument could possess. Yet she never lost the playful undertone that had drawn people in initially. It was that mix of humor and talent that made the performance so engaging. The audience was completely absorbed, caught between laughter and admiration, unsure how to categorize what they were witnessing. The melody began to change again, becoming more complex and layered. She added subtle pauses, delicate touches, and gentle flourishes that elevated the music. Each note seemed carefully placed to evoke emotion. The children whispered to each other, excited and amazed. Adults exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they were witnessing something special. It was a moment that bridged generations, bringing everyone together through the unexpected beauty of the performance. At one point, she hit a key that produced a slightly discordant sound, just enough to remind the audience of the prank. A few people giggled, but they quickly realized it was intentional. The young woman was in control of every detail, blending humor and talent seamlessly. The prank had not ended. It had transformed into an artful expression that kept everyone guessing. It was a clever balance, and she knew exactly how to maintain it. The room seemed to lean closer, as if drawn in by an invisible force. Even those at the back strained to hear the music more clearly. Her playful expressions, the subtle winks, and the exaggerated gestures kept the energy light while the music carried a surprising depth. People were laughing softly, gasping quietly, and sometimes holding their breath, all at the same time. It was a mix of emotions that made the experience unforgettable. She glanced briefly at the small boy who had been watching her intently from the front. He was now completely silent, eyes wide with wonder. She gave him a tiny nod, as if sharing a secret, and returned to the piano. The rest of the audience followed her lead, captivated and attentive. The prank had started with laughter, but it was evolving into something deeply engaging and emotionally moving. As the melody progressed, her confidence grew. She added gentle trills, soft chords, and playful runs that made the music sparkle. The audience leaned in, caught by the rhythm and the beauty of the unexpected performance. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. The young woman's fingers seemed to have a mind of their own, dancing effortlessly across the keys, creating moments of tension, release, and surprise. She slowed down at times, letting the notes hang in the air, creating a sense of suspense. The audience held their breath, sensing something extraordinary. The children whispered excitedly, and the adults exchanged amazed glances. The room was completely absorbed, no one wanting the music to end. The prank had set the stage, but now the talent and skill were telling their own story. It was a masterful combination, one that left everyone guessing what would come next. She maintained just enough playful gestures to remind the audience of the joke, but it was clear that she was fully in control. Each movement was deliberate, each note carefully chosen. People felt the mixture of humor and talent in every chord. The room seemed to vibrate with excitement, the energy shifting from laughter to awe. Even those who had come with low expectations were now fully engaged, captivated by the performance. By the end of this part of her performance, the audience was completely entranced. The prank had accomplished its initial goal of capturing attention, but it had evolved into a remarkable display of skill. People sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just experienced. The young woman smiled faintly, enjoying the reactions around her. She had started with a playful act, but she had taken the room on a journey that no one expected. Every eye was on her as she prepared to transition into the next part of the performance. The audience was ready, even if they did not know it yet, for the full surprise that was coming. The room was filled with anticipation, excitement, and a shared sense of wonder. The prank had drawn them in, and now the music itself was holding them, each note carrying them further into a story they would never forget. The playful start had transformed into something captivating, setting the stage for the next moment of shock and awe. The room was silent except for the sound of the piano. The young woman had completely shifted the mood from laughter to awe, and the audience was struggling to process what they were hearing. Her fingers moved with precision, each note flowing into the next like water over smooth stones. The melody was no longer playful but expressive, full of emotion that seemed to reach every corner of the hall. People leaned forward, caught by the beauty and the skill, realizing that what they had thought was a prank was actually a display of hidden talent. She glanced at the crowd, noticing the mix of reactions. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the unexpected depth of the music. Children were silent, captivated by the delicate patterns of sound. Adults whispered to each other, marveling at the control and confidence she displayed. Even those who had initially laughed at her seemed stunned into silence. The prank had worked in its first stage by drawing attention, but now the true performance was taking hold, and it was far beyond anyone's expectations. With a slight nod to herself, she began to play more confidently, adding layers of harmony that gave the music a richness the audience could feel in their chest. Each chord was deliberate, each sequence carefully constructed. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story through the piano. The shifts in tempo and the gentle crescendos made people lean closer, as if afraid they might miss a single note. Every time she paused for effect, the audience held its collective breath, waiting for what would come next. A small boy in the front row whispered to his sister, "How can she do that? I thought she was joking." The sister shook her head, her eyes wide, unable to answer. The entire room seemed to be sharing the same question, caught between disbelief and admiration. The young woman smiled faintly, letting her fingers dance lightly over the keys, creating delicate trills that added a playful sparkle to the music. The audience sensed the duality of her performance. The prank and the hidden genius intertwined in perfect balance. She leaned slightly to one side, exaggerating a playful gesture as if to say, "Oops, did I make a mistake?" A few people chuckled quietly, but the sound of the next note quickly silenced them. It was a gentle reminder that the prank was still part of the performance, that her act had layers meant to surprise and delight. The room was caught in a state of suspended amazement, not knowing whether to laugh, clap, or simply listen in wonder. Every movement she made was deliberate, every pause carefully calculated to heighten the impact of her talent. The melody grew more complex. She began to incorporate subtle rhythms that challenged the listener's expectations. Her fingers moved faster, but with clarity and precision. Notes that had once seemed chaotic were now structured and expressive. The audience, who had assumed they were watching a joke, now found themselves completely entranced. Adults whispered softly, asking each other if she had always known how to play this well. The answer, of course, was yes, and that knowledge made the performance even more astonishing. She glanced briefly at the back of the room, seeing teenagers who had been recording her on their phones earlier. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, their devices forgotten at their sides. One whispered, "I can't believe it. She's actually incredible." Another nodded slowly, shaking their head, unable to comprehend the transformation from prank to performance. The young woman's smile grew, aware of the effect she had on everyone. Her plan was working perfectly. The prank had set the stage, and now the hidden talent was fully revealed. The music shifted once more, moving from a playful, light-hearted tone to something more serious and profound. She played a slow, resonant melody that seemed to echo through the room, touching the hearts of those listening. People leaned back slightly, absorbing the emotional weight of each note. Even the children seemed quieter now, sensing the depth of the music. The room was full of silent admiration, the kind that comes when someone has been completely surprised by skill and creativity. She allowed herself to enjoy the moment. The audience was fully engaged, their eyes fixed on her hands as they glided over the keys. The initial laughter and amusement had transformed into complete attention. Each note she played added to the story she was telling, a story that had begun as a prank, but had become something far more memorable. The subtle blend of humor and mastery created a unique experience that no one in the room would forget. Occasionally, she would return to a slightly clumsy gesture, pressing a wrong note with exaggerated exaggeration. A few people giggled softly, realizing that she was still keeping the playful aspect alive. But the brilliance of her playing immediately overshadowed these small jokes. The contrast made the performance even more compelling. It was as if she was saying, "I can be playful and masterful at the same time," and the audience was completely captivated by the combination. The melody began to build toward a climax, the notes flowing faster and more passionately. Her hands moved with incredible coordination, each key pressed with intention. The audience could feel the energy rising, a sense of anticipation filling the room. People leaned forward instinctively, unable to tear their eyes away. Some whispered softly, trying to predict what would come next, while others simply sat in awe, absorbing the music as it washed over them. She allowed the music to soar, reaching heights of emotion that were unexpected for a prankster at a piano. Her fingers danced across the keys, creating harmonies that were both complex and beautiful. The audience felt a wave of emotion, a mix of surprise, admiration, and delight. The prank had served its purpose. It had captured attention, drawn people in, and now it was delivering something far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. A few people in the crowd, unable to contain themselves, began to clap softly during the quieter moments. She acknowledged them with a subtle smile but continued to play, letting the music speak for itself. The claps grew, becoming part of the rhythm, adding to the energy of the room. Everyone was participating, whether consciously or not, in the unfolding story of the music. The prank had created a bridge between humor and artistry, and the audience was walking across it with her. As the piece progressed, she returned briefly to lighter, whimsical notes, reminding the audience of the playful side that had started the performance. The contrast made the powerful sections even more moving. Children giggled softly, and adults whispered in amazement, unsure how someone could balance such skill with humor so effortlessly. Every gesture, every note, was carefully crafted to maintain the delicate balance she had established. She could see the astonishment on people's faces and felt a quiet satisfaction. The prank had worked brilliantly, capturing attention and setting expectations low. Now she was defying those expectations with every note. The room was completely captivated, caught in a moment that would be remembered long after the piano stopped. It was a rare experience, a blend of surprise, skill, and emotion that held everyone together in a shared sense of wonder. By the time she reached the middle of her performance, the audience was fully engaged. Their reactions had shifted from amusement to curiosity and now to amazement. Children whispered excitedly to each other, and adults leaned forward, trying to catch every note. Some people even closed their eyes, letting the music fill them completely. The prank had transformed into a journey, one that had taken everyone by surprise and held them spellbound. She smiled faintly, enjoying the reactions and the energy in the room. The music continued, each note carefully chosen to convey emotion, to surprise, and to delight. The audience was completely immersed, caught between laughter at the playful gestures and awe at the talent they were witnessing. The young woman had taken a simple prank and turned it into a performance that no one could have anticipated, and the result was a room full of people completely captivated by her skill and creativity. Every hand movement, every subtle gesture, every note played was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The prank had been the perfect introduction, drawing attention and lowering expectations. Now, the music itself was taking over, carrying the audience along on a journey they could never have predicted. The room was full of silent admiration, punctuated occasionally by soft gasps and whispers of disbelief. The prank had evolved into something extraordinary, and everyone present knew they were witnessing something truly special. The energy in the room had reached a level she had never seen before. The audience, who had begun the performance laughing at what they assumed was a harmless joke, were now completely captivated. Every note she played seemed to hold them spellbound, and the room itself felt charged with anticipation. Children were sitting cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide, following each movement of her fingers. Adults leaned forward, holding their breath, completely caught up in the unexpected transformation of a prank into a breathtaking performance. She leaned slightly toward the piano, her eyes glinting with a mix of concentration and mischief. The playful gestures she had used to lure the audience into thinking she was unskilled were now subtle, almost imperceptible, woven seamlessly into her professional mastery. Occasionally, she would let her hand miss a note intentionally, a faint reminder that the prank was still alive within the performance. The audience noticed it only briefly, then was quickly swept back into the mesmerizing flow of the music. Her fingers moved across the keys with incredible precision, creating a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the entire room. Each chord and sequence was deliberate, expressing emotion that words could never capture. The prank had succeeded in drawing attention, but it was the depth of her skill that now held the room captive. The sound of the piano filled every corner, resonating off the walls and reaching even the farthest edges of the hall. People who had been chatting earlier were now silent, completely absorbed by the performance. She introduced subtle shifts in tempo, starting with a slow, gentle melody that tugged at the hearts of the audience, then gradually building to faster, more dramatic sequences that made everyone lean forward instinctively. The contrast between the playful missteps and the powerful, controlled music was extraordinary. The room seemed to breathe with her performance, each note a heartbeat, each pause a moment of suspense. The prank had become the perfect setup for an emotional crescendo that no one had seen coming. Some in the audience tried to whisper to each other, but the words failed to carry over the music. A mother held her child closer, whispering, "I can't believe she's playing like this." Another adult, whose eyes glistened with surprise, murmured, "It's like she's telling a story with every note." Even the teenagers who had been filming earlier were frozen in disbelief, their phones forgotten, captivated by the unfolding magic. She continued, her hands moving faster, yet never losing control or clarity. The playful gestures she had woven into the performance reminded the audience of the lighthearted start, but the skill and emotion behind the music quickly overshadowed them. The room was held in a delicate balance between amusement and awe, and she navigated it effortlessly. The prank had opened the door, and now she was walking everyone through a world of talent they had never expected. As the music reached a particularly dramatic sequence, she allowed a small pause. The room seemed to exhale with her, the audience hanging on the silence. Then, with a single powerful chord, she launched into a new section of the performance, faster and more intricate than anything before. The audience gasped, leaning forward in unison. The children's eyes widened, and even the most skeptical adults felt their hearts quicken. It was the kind of moment that left people speechless, where the room itself seemed suspended in anticipation. Her hands moved with incredible speed, each note landing precisely where it needed to be. The prank was now secondary to the sheer talent on display, yet it still lingered in the playful winks and small missteps that reminded the audience of the lighthearted start. It was a rare combination, and the effect was mesmerizing. People were laughing quietly at the reminders of the joke, then immediately falling silent in awe as she delivered another unexpected flourish. The entire room was caught in a wave of alternating amusement and amazement. She slowed down slightly, letting a soft, haunting melody fill the space. The notes lingered in the air, drawing the audience in closer, almost as if they could feel the music touching them personally. Children tilted their heads, listening with rapt attention. Adults closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The prank had done its work in creating engagement, but now the real performance was taking center stage, leaving everyone captivated by the skill and emotion that had been hidden behind a playful exterior. Occasionally, she would glance at the audience, her expression playful yet confident. Each look seemed to convey a shared secret, a reminder that the journey from chaos to brilliance was intentional. People smiled quietly, catching the subtle humor woven into the performance, then returned to the wonder of the music. It was a delicate balance she maintained effortlessly, keeping the audience on edge between laughter and complete awe. The intensity of the music built again, each note sharper, faster, and more emotionally charged. She played with a combination of technical skill and expressive depth that left the audience completely enthralled. Some whispered softly, trying to comprehend how someone could transition from a joke to such a profound display of talent in a matter of minutes. The room was alive with energy, every person caught in the spell of the unexpected transformation. The young woman allowed herself a brief smile as she noticed the reactions around the room. She had succeeded in her plan. The prank had drawn everyone in, and now the performance had taken over, captivating their attention and emotions. Her fingers danced effortlessly across the keys, creating harmonies that resonated with everyone in the hall. The contrast between the playful start and the emotional depth of the music made each note more powerful, leaving a lasting impression on the audience. She began to weave in lighter, more whimsical sequences again, just enough to remind the audience of the prank without diminishing the impact of her skill. Children giggled softly at the familiar playful notes, and adults exchanged amazed glances, unable to believe the transformation they were witnessing. It was a clever and engaging blend, the perfect balance between humor and talent that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. The room was now fully immersed in the performance. Every sound, every pause, every playful misstep was carefully designed to hold attention and evoke emotion. People were leaning forward, holding their breath, whispering softly, and smiling in delight. Even those who had been skeptical at the beginning were now fully engaged, caught between laughter, surprise, and admiration. The prank had worked brilliantly, setting the stage for a performance that no one would forget. As the music reached its peak, she allowed the notes to flow freely, combining all the elements she had introduced. Playful gestures, intricate melodies, dramatic pauses, and emotional depth. The audience was completely absorbed, caught in the experience, unable to look away or think about anything else. The prank had evolved into something extraordinary, something that transcended humor and revealed hidden talent in the most captivating way. Her final sequences of the performance were both dramatic and playful, leaving the audience guessing, reacting, and engaging fully in the moment. Children whispered excitedly to each other. Adults leaned forward with wide eyes, and a sense of shared wonder filled the room. The prank had set the stage, but the skill, emotion, and creativity had taken over completely. Everyone present was part of something unique, an experience that blended humor, surprise, and awe into one unforgettable evening. By the end of her performance, the room was alive with energy. People were on the edge of their seats, clapping softly, whispering in disbelief, and marveling at the transformation from a playful joke to a masterful display of talent. The young woman smiled faintly, satisfied with the reactions around her. The prank had worked brilliantly in capturing attention, and now the audience had been treated to a performance that would stay with them for a long time. It was a moment of pure magic, where the unexpected revealed itself in the most extraordinary way. The final notes of her performance lingered in the room, a delicate echo that seemed to hang in the air longer than anyone expected. Silence followed for a heartbeat, and then the audience erupted into applause. It started softly, with hesitant claps, but quickly grew into a wave of cheers and whistles that filled the hall. People were on their feet, clapping, smiling, and laughing in disbelief at the transformation they had witnessed. The young woman leaned back slightly, a faint smile playing across her lips, as if to say, "I told you it was a prank." The children ran forward, their faces alight with excitement. They hugged her legs, shouting in delight and telling her how amazing she had been. Adults surrounded her as well, patting her on the back, shaking her hand, and asking how she could play like that. Some whispered quietly, sharing their astonishment with one another, unable to comprehend how a simple prank could turn into such a powerful performance. She nodded and smiled, responding warmly, keeping her playful charm intact even amid the admiration. People crowded around her, eager to talk and ask questions. One older woman said softly, "You had us completely fooled. We thought it was all a joke. And then, wow, I've never heard anything like it." Another man shook his head, laughing. "You could have fooled us into thinking you were terrible forever. But that was incredible." The young woman laughed quietly, shrugging her shoulders as if it had all happened by chance, though everyone knew it had been a carefully crafted performance. The prank had captured attention, and her skill had delivered the real surprise. The children continued to giggle, mimicking the playful gestures she had made at the start of the performance. She knelt down briefly to join them, demonstrating one of the small gestures, making them laugh even more. The atmosphere was light, warm, and full of joy. The prank had been the hook, but the talent had left a lasting impression. People were talking to each other, sharing their amazement, recounting moments that had caught them off guard, and expressing how they had never expected to see such skill hidden behind playful mischief. The young woman looked around the room, noticing the range of reactions. Some people were still catching their breath from the sheer brilliance of what they had just witnessed. Others were smiling softly, savoring the mixture of humor, surprise, and artistry. The prank had worked perfectly in drawing attention, but it was the genuine display of talent that left a lasting memory. She could see it in their eyes. Awe, admiration, and a little disbelief that something so unexpected could be real. She allowed herself to enjoy the moment quietly, letting the applause wash over her. The prank had brought laughter, curiosity, and engagement. Her skill had brought wonder, respect, and emotional connection. The combination was unique and memorable, a rare moment where humor and mastery met to create something extraordinary. She knew that the audience would leave with a story to tell, a story about how a simple joke turned into an unforgettable performance. People slowly began to gather in small groups, talking excitedly about the experience. Some replayed the performance in their minds, recounting the playful start and the shocking reveal of talent. Others tried to describe how the music had made them feel, struggling to find the right words. The young woman stayed near the piano, answering questions, laughing with the children, and sharing gentle smiles with the adults. The prank had worked perfectly, but the emotional impact of her performance was what lingered in the room, creating a shared experience that would not be forgotten. A few individuals approached her cautiously, as if they were afraid to break the spell. One whispered, "I can't believe how good you are. Were you trained secretly all these years?" She nodded subtly, her smile widening, acknowledging the truth without revealing too much. The mystery added to the charm of the performance. People were fascinated not only by her skill but by the playful deception that had allowed her to surprise everyone so completely. Children continued to dance and move around the piano, occasionally glancing up at her with admiration. She joined in briefly, guiding their hands over the keys, letting them play small notes, and making them laugh. The atmosphere was full of warmth, joy, and excitement. The prank had drawn attention, the performance had captured hearts, and now the room was filled with a sense of shared delight. The audience had been taken on a journey, starting with humor, moving through curiosity and anticipation, and ending with awe and celebration. The applause gradually softened, replaced by murmurs of admiration and quiet conversations. People were sharing their favorite moments, comparing their reactions, and expressing their astonishment. The young woman stood near the piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly, as she smiled at the collective response. The prank had been the beginning, the performance had been the journey, and now the shared amazement was the reward. It was a perfect cycle, one that left everyone in the room feeling connected and inspired. Several adults approached to thank her personally, telling her how much they had enjoyed the performance. Some admitted that they had doubted her at first, laughing at the clumsy start, and were now overwhelmed by the talent they had witnessed. Others complimented the playful energy she had maintained throughout, noting how it had made the experience even more engaging and human. She accepted each compliment with a soft smile and gentle nod, enjoying the genuine admiration and connection with the audience. The children gathered around her once more, asking if she would play again. She laughed softly, promising to show them another playful piece later. The energy in the room was vibrant and joyful, a mixture of excitement and lingering wonder. The prank had sparked laughter and curiosity, but the performance had created memories, a lasting impression that would be remembered by everyone present. It was a perfect blend of humor, skill, and emotional impact, a combination that few had ever witnessed. She allowed the audience to linger, talking, laughing, and sharing their experiences. Some replayed the events in their minds, recalling the exaggerated clumsiness at the start and the sudden transformation into something brilliant. Others expressed their surprise at the emotional depth of the music and the playful mastery that had guided the performance. The prank had captured attention, but the talent had left a lasting impression that would not fade with time. Finally, she stood and acknowledged the room with a gentle bow. The audience cheered again, a mix of applause, whistles, and laughter. People were smiling widely, some wiping tears of joy or disbelief from their eyes. She stepped back from the piano, still smiling, allowing the energy of the moment to settle naturally. The prank had worked as intended, creating laughter and engagement, and the performance had taken everyone on a journey that was unforgettable. As people began to leave, they continued to talk excitedly about what they had witnessed. The children chattered about the playful notes, the adults discussed the astonishing skill, and everyone shared their favorite moments from the performance. The young woman stayed near the piano, her presence calm and inviting, enjoying the aftermath of the prank-turned performance. She knew that the experience had created a memory that would be cherished, a story they would tell for years to come. The room gradually emptied, but the energy lingered. The prank had been a clever introduction, the performance a stunning revelation, and the shared amazement was the lasting gift. Everyone who had been present had been part of a unique experience, one that combined humor, skill, and emotional connection in a way that was rare and unforgettable. She smiled softly, satisfied with the impact of the entire journey. As the final few guests left, she gently closed the piano lid and looked around the empty room. The echoes of laughter, whispers, and applause seemed to linger in the air. She reflected on how a simple prank, starting with exaggerated clumsiness and playful gestures, had transformed into a moment of pure magic. The audience had been fooled, engaged, surprised, and inspired, and the experience had become a shared memory that would be remembered long after the day had ended. It was a moment that perfectly captured the essence of surprise and talent, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the most unforgettable endings. The prank had been the invitation, and the performance had been the gift. In that small hall, among children and adults alike, she had created a memory of laughter, wonder, and amazement that would live on in the hearts of everyone who had been there.